Have you ever seen someone who, when you look into their eyes, you feel as if you are facing something not human? It was 1984. The city of Los Angeles seemed anesthetized after decades of urban violence, but nothing would prepare its inhabitants for what was to come. Leaving no traces, a man emerged from the shadows during the early hours. No one knew who he was. No one understood why he did what he did. Only one thing was known: he attacked at random, in any neighborhood, at any time. Young people, elderly, entire families. There was no pattern, there was no logic, only terror. The authorities, confused, called him the night intruder. But on the streets, whispered among people, his name was different. A name that carried an aura of pure evil. A name that would be remembered for decades. And he said that he did not act alone. Before being called the son of the devil, Richard Ramirez was just a child with empty eyes and strange silence. He grew up in El Paso, Texas, amidst screams, assaults, and a fear that seemed to live inside the walls of the house. His father, authoritarian and violent, imposed brutal punishments for any reason. But what would mark Richard the most did not come from inside the house, but from outside. His cousin Miguel, a Vietnam War veteran, returned to the United States with a destroyed mind and even more disturbing stories. Stories he told Richard with pride. And more than words, he showed images. Real photographs, so real that they shaped the mind of an impressionable boy. At only 12 years old, Richard witnessed his cousin commit something terrible, and nothing was done. Justice did not arrive, morality evaporated, and at that moment, something seemed to awaken inside him. It was not just anger. It was not just revolt. It was something deeper and silent. Richard's eyes began to change. He was no longer the scared boy. Now, he looked like someone who evaluates. Like someone searching for something, or someone. During his adolescence, he plunged into heavy drugs. LSD, cocaine, anything that could take him away from reality. But what he found in those delusions was not peace, it was darkness. He began to wander the nights of Los Angeles, absorbing all the darkest things the city could offer. Occult cults, strange rituals, books about invocations and sacrifices. The name Satan stopped being a symbol. It became a mentor, a guide. Richard believed he was being prepared, that he was part of something bigger, something evil. And it was in this state, between chemical delirium and obscure devotion, that he committed his first act. Cold, not fast, without remorse. The police didn't notice. The media didn't notice, but he felt a pleasure he had never felt before. A power that finally gave him meaning. In his mind, the predator was born. The nights in Los Angeles were no longer safe. Women, men, children, no one knew who would be next. The newspapers called them random attacks. The police lost said, there is no connection between the cases. But there was. A trail of fear, a dark look described by survivors. A crooked smile, like someone who enjoyed other people's suffering. The signature was chaos itself. The authorities were in panic. The most experienced detectives couldn't put the puzzle together. There was no logic, no sequence, no clear motivation. And while everyone tried to understand, he continued. Once he broke into a house just to watch the despair. Another time, he left messages on the walls written with lipstick, symbols and phrases only he understood. Some victims escaped, but most had no chance. And then a name began to circulate among the police, Night Stalker. The population entered a state of terror. Doors locked, lights on during the early hours. Children sleeping with crucifixes, churches packed. But the Night Stalker was still free, and seemed to feed on all that fear. The city was besieged by fear. The name Night Stalker was no longer just a nickname. It was an entity, a collective shadow in the minds of Los Angeles residents. But every shadow has its crack. In a mistake of trust, he was seen, his face plastered on newspapers and TVs. For the first time, the city knew the monster's face, and the monster knew the weight of fame. In broad daylight, he was recognized by residents while trying to escape. A group formed, a human siege. They were not police, they were the people. Ordinary people, tired of fear, went after him. He ran, tried to hide, but he was caught. He was beaten right there, on the street. The son of the devil fell before the children of the people. The police arrived late, but they arrived to take him away. As they put him in the patrol car, injured and handcuffed, he smiled. A crooked smile from someone with no remorse, only pleasure in seeing the world burn. The nightmare finally gained a real name, Richard Ramirez. But the most disturbing was yet to come. The courtroom was packed. Cameras, journalists, onlookers, and at the center of it all, him, Richard Ramirez, didn't enter as a defendant. He entered as a spectacle, wearing dark glasses, loose hair, and a defiant smile on his lips, as if he were the star of a macabre movie. While witnesses cried, recalling the terror, he yawned, laughed, drew symbols on his hands, struck poses. The trial became a circus, and he, the clown of chaos. But behind the scenes, specialists tried to understand what was in his mind. What turned someone into a shadow of the night? Psychiatrists sought diagnoses: sociopath, psychotic, or just an irreversible void. In court, he said phrases that seemed like scripts from a nightmare, spoke naturally about topics that would freeze the blood, and worst of all, with pleasure. There was no remorse, no moral restraint. Only the performance of a man who, inside, had already disappeared. Richard denied nothing. On the contrary, he used everything as part of a performance. A character, perhaps? But created by whom? By the pain of childhood? By accumulated rage, or by something no one would ever understand? In the end, the sentence came as if it were just another act of the theater. Life imprisonment, but even behind bars, he still smiled. Years went by. Time erased headlines, changed names in the news. But his name remained. Richard Ramirez wasn't just a criminal. He was a distorted reflection of what happens when everything goes wrong. When abandonment meets hatred. When trauma turns into a cult of darkness. In prison, he received letters, fans' marriage proposals, an icon for those who romanticize the abyss. But what does that say about us? About society? Why are we fascinated by horror? Why do we look at him, afraid yet unable to look away? Deep down, stories like Ramirez's remind us that evil doesn't come from nowhere. It's cultivated, fed, silenced for years until it explodes. He died in 2013, isolated, sick. But his shadow still lingers. In pop culture, in movies, in whispered conversations. In the collective imagination that keeps trying to find logic. In something that might not have an explanation. The Richard Ramirez case doesn't end with his death. It continues, as a warning, as a dark whisper, as an echo of something we still don't fully understand.